The story opens in a shadowy room where the main character slowly wakes up. In front of him lies a girl, motionless, her body resting on a glowing crimson magic circle surrounded by flickering candles. Confused and alarmed, he asks himself what's going on, his eyes darting across the room. Strange coffins line the walls, and the floor is smeared with writings in blood. A wave of panic hits as he struggles to understand where he is. Suddenly, fragments of memory rush back. He remembers the blinding headlights of a truck, the crash, and the realization that he was on his way to the hospital when his life ended. Could it be that he was reincarnated? Before he can process it, the girl stirs and whispers his name, Lux. Stunned, he blurts out, asking if she really called him that, and she nods. Overwhelmed, he grabs her shoulders and shakes her, desperate for confirmation. Startled by his sudden intensity, the girl cries out. Heart pounding, he scrambles to find a mirror. When his eyes finally meet his reflection, the truth crashes down on him. He isn't himself anymore. He has become Lux Zeldia, a character from the game Blaze Fantasy. Horror fills him as he realizes this is the worst possible twist. That very game was the one he had been addicted to for years. His gaze then shifts to a map hanging on the wall, showing the kingdom of Rogland and the Zeldia family's territory. Thoughts spiral in his mind, fear mixing with disbelief. As he stares, lost in shock, the girl, still bound, softly asks if he's alright, confused by his sudden obsession with the map. At that moment, Lux came to a clear realization. There was no mistaking it. Everything around him matched perfectly with the official world setting from the book he knew so well. While the girl sat there looking puzzled, Lux paced the room, trying to calm his racing thoughts. He had read that book so many times the pages had grown soft from use. It was a thick volume, one he had bought for a hefty 800 yen, and worth every coin to him. Blaze Fantasy, or Blaspheme, as players called it, had always been his favorite game. In that game, the player's main goal was to raise the affection of different heroines. There was a school life section where you worked toward a happy ending, and a battle section where you fought alongside those heroines to defeat the Demon King. It was a beloved action RPG that had captured his heart. And now, there was no doubt about it, Lux had actually been reborn inside Blaspheme. His mind then wandered to Lyra Scarlet, wondering how she was doing. When he mentioned her name, the girl before him tilted her head and asked if he meant the princess, casually noting that she was fine. Excited, Lux quickly asked about Eliza and Claire as well. But to the girl, it sounded like he was just rattling off names of random women. Smirking, she teased him about being in love with all of them. Lux didn't even try to deny it. He boldly admitted it was true. Of course, what he meant was that he loved them as a fan, but the girl only grew more bewildered at his confession. As she gave him a strange look, Lux's mind spun with a thrilling idea of actually meeting those heroines now that he was living inside this world. He began replaying the storylines of the game in his head, completely forgetting that the girl was still staring at him in confusion. Only after a while did he snap back to the present and finally ask her what she was doing there. Out of nowhere, the girl let out a sharp scream, accusing him of what he had done to her. This girl was Morga, a maid in training who worked for the Zeldia family. Lux froze, completely lost, since he couldn't remember anything she was talking about. The truth was that, before he reincarnated, the original Lux had tried to perform a demon summoning ritual, and Morga had been chosen as the sacrifice. Because he had suddenly been thrown into this body, Lux had no memory of those events. In Blaspheme, Lux Zeldia wasn't a hero, but a mid-level boss, someone hated and looked down upon. Trying to change that fate, Lux quickly declared that they would cancel the summoning, and instead clean up the entire mess. He untied Morga and apologized for dragging her into it. Expecting her to be angry, he was surprised when she admitted she didn't really mind after all. It got her out of her regular chores. Lux stammered at her strange logic, unable to understand how skipping work could outweigh being part of a demon ritual. Still, the two set about tidying the room together. While they worked, Lux quietly wondered what his next move should be. At that moment, another maid stepped inside, telling Morga she was needed in the main hall. But when her eyes landed on Lux, she froze, stammering in shock. He quickly apologized for frightening her and for keeping Morga occupied. The maid, however, avoided his gaze nervously. Then, by accident, her eyes met his face and she shrieked in terror. To her, he looked like the cursed child of the evil eye. Lux stood stunned as the maid turned and ran straight for the door. Morga called after her to wait, but the girl didn't stop. The room fell silent, and Morga tried to comfort Lux. He brushed it off, pretending he was fine, and admitted he could understand her fear. After all, in this world, anyone with the evil eye was hated. Centuries ago, the previous Demon King had also been born with the cursed evil eye. Over time, fear of this power became etched so deeply in people's minds that it turned into legend. It was said that any child born with such an eye would only bring ruin to the nation. Because of this superstition, Lux's own life was marked by tragedy. His mother ended her life not long after giving birth to him, and his father treated him as though he wasn't even there. Shunned from the start for being the child of the evil eye, the original Lux grew twisted, his heart consumed by an obsession with summoning demons. Years later, he actually managed to resurrect the Demon King's soul. From then on, Lux was manipulated, forced into endless battles against the hero. Eventually, his mind gave in to the Demon King's whispers, and in every path of the story, Lux's fate was sealed death. His corpse became the Demon King's final tool, as the evil eye was ripped from him to bring about the king's full revival. That meant so long as Lux carried the evil eye, he would always be hunted by the Demon King's forces. Even now, after being reincarnated, it seemed like his destiny was only to meet death faster. In a twisted way, it felt like he had been reborn just to speedrun his end. Dark thoughts filled his mind, his fears spilling out through his gaze. But then, reality pulled him back when Morga spoke again. She explained that the maid who had run off was still new. Lux brushed it off, saying it didn't matter, but Morga continued, revealing the truth: the maid's village had been destroyed by demons, which explained why she feared the evil eye more than anyone else. Lux understood her pain all too well. Suddenly, his vision blurred, stars dancing before his eyes. His body gave out, and the last thing he heard before falling into darkness was Morga's desperate voice calling his name. Later that night, Lux slowly woke up again. He tried to brush it off, saying he was just a little worn out, but Morga firmly told him to rest. She even began feeding him, though Lux quickly assured her that he could manage on his own. Out of nowhere, he asked if she was scared of his evil eye. Morga blinked in surprise, confused by why he was bringing it up now. She admitted that, yes, at first she had been afraid. But after spending time with him, she realized the so-called evil eye didn't actually do anything harmful. Over time, she stopped fearing it. Now, she said with a gentle smile, it just felt like she was looking after a spoiled younger brother. Her words struck Lux deeply. Half teasing, he asked if that really made him the little brother. Without hesitation, Morga nodded, reminding him that she was older anyway. That night, as Lux lay in bed, her words lingered in his heart, but his thoughts drifted back to his cursed eye. Turning toward the nightstand, he noticed a slip of paper sticking out of an old book. Curious, he pulled it out and discovered a list, something the original Lux must have written. Reading through it, his chest tightened. The list revealed that the old Lux wanted revenge on those who mocked his eyes. He longed for recognition from his father, but above all, he simply wanted happiness. Lux stared at the words in silence, lifting his hand toward his eye as if trying to understand the pain behind them. Closing his eyes, he came to a quiet decision. The following morning, Morgan nearly panicked when Lux announced that he wanted to head to the training grounds. She reminded him that just last year, he had given up only minutes into practice. That fact puzzled Lux too, but when he looked down at his thin arms, the reason became clear: he was hopelessly weak. It was no wonder that, even in the game, Lux had always been a terrible swordsman. But Lux had already made up his mind. With determination burning in his voice, he told Morga to take him to the training grounds. Though hesitant, she eventually gave in and led him there. The area was filled with young men practicing hard, each of them aiming to become skilled swordsmen. Curious, Morga asked what exactly Lux intended to do. He replied with confidence he planned to test out his evil eye. Her eyes widened in confusion, but Lux explained that he wanted to try something new. In the game, he had never really understood how to use the evil eye properly, but this time he felt he could. It wasn't just a curse meant to frighten others, it had real power. Closing his eyes for a moment, he reopened them with sharp concentration. Instantly, his surroundings changed. He could sense the movements of the soldiers around him as if their skills were flowing directly into his body. Every swing, every step, they resonated within him. Morga eventually interrupted, saying it was time to head back. Surprised, Lux argued they had only just begun, but then he noticed the orange glow of the setting sun. Hours had passed in what felt like minutes. That only confirmed it: his plan might actually work. For the rest of the week, Lux returned to the training grounds every single day. He didn't join in but stayed on the sidelines, watching with intense focus. Soon, the soldiers began noticing him. One pointed out how often he came, while another muttered that all he did was stare. Eventually, a man walked up to him, breaking the silence. He asked if Lux wasn't overdue to get some training himself. Lux hadn't sensed his presence at all, but he masked his nerves and casually asked who the man was. The stranger introduced himself as Joris, the commanding officer. Lux tensed immediately, realizing how powerful he seemed. Joris crouched slightly to meet Lux's eyes, a hint of amusement in his gaze, and asked him directly did Lux want him to be his mentor. Out of nowhere, Lux asked if Joris intended to fight him. The question caught the old man off guard, but Lux, brimming with confidence, declared that he wanted to test his own strength. Morga, however, grew uneasy, worried about how reckless Lux was being. After all, Joris wasn't just anyone, he was a former captain of the Royal Knights, a man whose skill and discipline were reflected in every soldier under his command. Joris turned his back on Lux and calmly agreed to the challenge, though he warned that he wouldn't be responsible if Lux ended up badly hurt. Soon after, both of them made their way to the arena, swords in hand. The gathered soldiers looked on in disbelief. None of them could understand why this boy was about to duel their commanding officer, but they stayed silent, curious to see what would happen. Standing across from Joris, Lux steadied his breathing, focusing his mind. From the sidelines, Morga scolded him for his recklessness, her voice sharp with worry. Joris, in contrast, remained calm and stern, telling Lux to give it everything he had. With a sudden spark of determination, Lux lifted his sword and shouted that he would take that offer. In the next instant, he launched forward at a speed that almost seemed inhuman. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Neither Morga nor the soldiers could believe what they were seeing. Lux's blade clashed against Joris's with tremendous force, the sound echoing through the arena. For the first time, Joris's expression shifted, his eyes widening slightly. He recognized the technique, the very sword style he had once taught within the Royal Knights, now being used by the boy standing before him. Joris then asked if Lux had really picked up that sword style just by watching. The truth was, the evil eye carried several abilities, and one of them was the Eye of Observation. When pushed to its limit, it allowed Lux to copy sword techniques and even magic spells simply by seeing them, like having a built-in cheat code. No grueling training arcs were needed when his eye worked like the ultimate shortcut. The duel raged on, neither side willing to give in. The soldiers watching were stunned. Lux, the boy with the cursed eye, was holding his ground against Joris, the seasoned commander. After a while, Lux pulled back, breathing heavily. He prepared to unleash the power slash, a move that made the spectators whisper in confusion. It was a beginner's technique, nothing impressive. But Joris didn't lower his guard. He could sense something different. Lux wasn't planning to use the slash in its usual form. He was pouring an extraordinary amount of magic into it, tapping into the true essence of the evil eye. Gathering every ounce of strength he had, Lux made a silent vow. He would not repeat the fate of the original storyline, dying and having his eye stolen by the Demon King. No, this time he would break the script. He would erase the role of villains, erase the middle bosses, and stop the Demon King's resurrection altogether. If he succeeded, the world would finally be safe, left only with the romance and happy endings between the heroes and heroines. Lux even laughed to himself at the thought it would turn him into just a background mob character. But that was fine. In fact, it was more than enough. Still, to achieve that peaceful future, he needed power. And to gain that power, he would master the full potential of his evil eye. Gripping his sword tightly, Lux dropped into position and charged straight at Joris. The strike landed with such force that the old knight bent to one knee to take the blow. Sword raised high, Lux shouted his resolve that he would live as a mere mob character, but one who would protect everyone. His heart burned with determination, refusing to accept the cruel fate written for him. He lunged again with everything he had, but while Lux fought with fiery passion, Joris met his strikes with calm, unshakable confidence. Soon, Lux's breath grew heavy, his strength faltering as he held onto his sword. Then it happened, his body gave out. Pain ripped through him, and he collapsed to the ground, crying out in agony. Every muscle screamed, leaving him shocked. What kind of move had just crushed him like that? Joris stepped forward, explaining in a composed voice that he hadn't used any special technique, he had simply blocked the attack. Lux's eyes widened in disbelief. How could that be? Joris clarified. While Lux had perfectly copied his soldiers' sword skills, his body was nowhere near as trained as theirs. In short, Lux had pushed himself far beyond what his body could handle. The realization shook him. It felt like trying to solo a boss fight with a level 1 character. Still trembling, Lux forced himself back to his feet and apologized for his reckless behavior. Yet his determination didn't waver. He declared that he truly wanted to grow stronger, asking if Joris would be willing to guide him. But before he could even finish the question, the old knight gave his answer yes. From that moment, Joris would help rebuild Lux's weak body from the ground up. Grateful, Lux bowed his head, asking Joris to take care of him. A few days later, Joris resumed his duties as the soldiers' drill master. His sharp voice echoed across the field as he ordered them to run another 20 laps. Groans and complaints filled the air. Everyone was exhausted, gasping for breath, saying they couldn't take this torture anymore. One soldier glanced at Lux and asked if he could still keep up, but Lux didn't waste his breath on an answer. Instead, he kept swinging his sword, his focus unshaken. His movements were sharp and disciplined, enough to make the others murmur in admiration. Joris, overhearing their chatter, wasn't impressed. To him, Lux's precise movements weren't training at all. So, with a strict tone, he ordered the soldiers to complete 100 sword swings, leaving them wide-eyed in shock. Lux, however, smiled faintly. He understood what Joris was doing. Sword techniques could be copied with the evil eye, but endurance, that was something he had to build himself. And that thought thrilled him. The idea of forging a strong body excited Lux more than anything. He threw himself into training, pushing his body until sunset. By the next morning, he was flat on his bed, every muscle screaming in pain. Joris casually noted that it was just severe muscle ache, while Morga scolded him for overdoing it. After all, Lux had been locked away for so long, it wasn't surprising his body wasn't ready for this kind of strain. Lux, however, didn't seem to hear their worries. His mind was spinning with wild visions of having a perfectly trained body. Joris told Morga that once Lux recovered, training would continue. Rest was also part of the process, and for now, it was the only thing he needed. That night, lying weakly on his bed, Lux's thoughts drifted to the bigger picture. Only 5 years remained before the main game would truly begin. But already, he had stepped off the path of the original Lux. He knew the evil eye would be targeted again and again, and whatever awaited him ahead, he was ready to face it. There was also the chance that the Demon King revival cult would act soon, which meant living as just a background character wouldn't be so simple after all. On top of that, a big event was coming even before the main game officially began. Lux knew he couldn't afford to waste any time. The very next day, Morga went around the entire mansion looking for him. She even asked another maid if she'd seen Lux, and finally got her answer. He was in his study, buried in books about dark magic. Carrying a tray of snacks, Morga stepped into the room, but her foot slipped and the tray went flying. In that instant, Lux cast his magic to slow everything down. To Morga's shock, he didn't bother saving her from falling, he only saved the tray of food. She hit the floor while the snacks landed safely. It was like she had been betrayed by gravity itself. After brushing off the embarrassment, Morga noticed the books and pointed out that he was studying magic. Lux explained that since his body was still healing, he wanted to use the time wisely, but something clearly bothered him. When she asked what was wrong, Lux admitted that he could only use dark magic. Morga raised an eyebrow and asked why that was a problem. He sighed, confessing that he wanted to use flashy spells, but all he could manage were support skills and debuffs. Morga wasn't having it. She reminded him that being able to use any kind of magic at all was already a gift. Her words hit Lux, especially when he realized she wasn't one of the lucky ones. She went on to explain that most people couldn't use magic at all, and she even envied him for it. Morga then recalled a senior maid who could use wind magic. It wasn't for fighting, but it was perfect for drying laundry. Even something so simple could be incredibly useful in daily life. At that moment, Lux shifted his mindset. There was no use wishing for magic he didn't have. Instead, he decided to fully dedicate himself to mastering dark magic. He explained to Morga that his combat style would be built around weakening enemies with debuffs while fighting with a sword. Hearing this, Morga's eyes lit up, and she eagerly offered to support him however she could. Later, Lux returned to his books, enjoying a rare moment of calm as he sipped tea and munched on sandwiches. He couldn't help but praise how tasty they were, which made Morga smile proudly. After all, she was the one who made them. When he thanked her, she laughed shyly, clearly pleased. But Lux wasn't done. He wanted to give her something in return. Using his imitation spell, Lux summoned dark magic to recreate objects. Normally, this required long observation of the original, but thanks to the evil eye's sharp perception, the process was almost effortless. Under the glow of his spell, a sandwich began to form in his hand. At first, Morga was amazed, but her excitement quickly turned into horror. The sandwich's final form was completely black, like it had crawled out of a nightmare. That thing carried lore. Lux scratched his head, embarrassed by the result. He admitted that he hadn't prepared the ingredients beforehand and had instead made them directly out of his mana. Morga noticed the sandwich crumbling apart in her hands, and Lux explained that materials created from pure mana would eventually break down. Worse, if his mana was drained, they would vanish entirely. Still, the thought lingered in his mind, what if it was actually possible to craft something perfect out of mana alone? Lux sat lost in thought, connecting pieces of information in his mind. He was so focused that he didn't even hear Morga calling his name out of concern. Snapping back to reality, he suddenly declared that his plan might actually work. He asked where the maid with wind magic was, and Morga answered that she was probably in the kitchen. When Morga asked if he was heading there, Lux nodded firmly. She hesitated, glancing at the strange black sandwich still on the table, wondering what on earth she should do with it. But Lux, completely caught up in his ideas, didn't bother to reply. Left alone, Morga stared at the odd gift, unsure if she should laugh, cry, or toss it away. Meanwhile, Lux threw himself into magic research and training every day. His efforts finally paid off. He had recovered enough strength to return to the training grounds. The anticipation of a real fight made his blood race. Soon, Joris signaled the start of the spar, and Lux and his opponent charged forward, swords clashing in a storm of steel and force. Both gave it their all, refusing to hold back. The soldier apologized mid-battle, saying he couldn't go easy on the young master. Lux only grinned and replied that he had no intention of holding back either. With a burst of speed, Lux launched himself into a backflip, moving faster than he thought possible. He was stunned. His body had reacted exactly the way he imagined it. He wasn't winded, nor did he feel fatigued. A smile crept across his face. This was proof of his hard work and training paying off. But his joy was short-lived. The soldier suddenly swung his blade at him, praising his skills. Startled back into reality, Lux quickly raised his sword to defend. The soldier admitted he couldn't match Lux's skill, but he still held the advantage in raw strength. With a crushing blow, he forced Lux down to one knee, the weight of the strike pressing heavily on him. Realizing he needed space, Lux prepared to break free. At that moment, Joris shouted from the sidelines, asking if that was really all Lux had. He reminded him that his true potential was far greater than what he was showing.